Welcome to the Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery, where every death had a life and every life had a story. My name is Jennie Johnson.
Hello, and I'm Diane Hartshorn.
We're doing something a little different for today's episode. We will have a guest joining us, but she's actually going to join us a bit later. So Diane and I are going to do sort of the first half of this episode first without our guest. And then when she gets here, we'll have her come on for the second half, which concerns her. So today's episode was actually inspired by a conversation Diane and I had after we finished recording last week's episode with Father Edward Looney. And as we always do when we record, especially after we've had a guest, they get off and then Diane and I sit and gab for a long time.
Yes.
Sometimes about podcast stuff and sometimes about other stuff. And we just happened to be talking about our upcoming production of Mice and Men, which I've been working on since, well, if you want to be honest, since last year, but we started working in earnest in like December, January. Got the show cast in February and we started our rehearsals right at the end of February. So we've been rehearsing mostly 3 times a week since then with our actors and getting the show ready. And it opens, by the time this episode comes out, it will open tomorrow. So it Friday the 25th, 26th, and 27th of April. So if you are local and you want to attend, hopefully by the time we air this episode, it won't be sold out. I know tickets have been selling really fast, so there's a chance it might be, but we do have the option of potentially expanding a little bit, at least the Friday and Saturday night performances. So if it happens to be sold out and you're listening and you're local and you want to go, send us a message over our either our Facebook or Instagram account, and I'll try and keep an eye on it. And if I can catch it, I can probably wiggle you in, even if it's sold out. So if you're, like I said, if you're local and interested, we will be doing the performance itself in Castle Pines at the Castle Pines Library. So this is Front Range Theater Company, which is the theater company I've been with for forever and who helps us with Beyond the Grave and everything every year. And also Douglas County Libraries, who I do a lot of theater with. Our theater company and Douglas County Libraries have a partnership that we've had for many, 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 many years, at least going back to 2014, I think. And that's before I started working with them. And for the most part, we've always done like children programming and children's shows, but we really are trying to reach an adult audience now. So we've started this new program called Classics on Stage. And that's why we're starting with Of Mice and Men. We thought that was such a great, like, inaugural show to start with.
The live theater is so much fun, though. It's just, there's such an energy that when you go watch these actors do their craft and knowing how much time and work they've put into it, it is, yeah, live theater is very enjoyable. So.
And we didn't know what the response was going to be when we put out the audition notice, because, for people familiar with the Denver metro area, we're in this, like the southeast end of Denver. And there is a lot of theater. We have down here, we have like the Pace Center in Parker, we have the Lone Tree Art Center in Lone Tree and stuff, but they do a lot of things that come in and leave. Like it's not something that's staying. They do a lot of musical theater, but there's not a lot on this side of Denver. There's not a lot of like the traditional theater with straight plays where you're putting on a drama or a comedy for the entertainment of adults. And, a lot of it's family entertainment, children's entertainment, which not a bad thing. I'm all for that too. But it's nice to have something where adults can go and sit and watch something that they will be familiar with. And Of Mice and Men is one of those books that is still on a lot of high school reading courses, definitely college reading courses. I read it when I was 17, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But anyway, the whole reason I'm talking about all of this is because this is what led to today's episode. So Diane and I had been talking on Monday night after we recorded, and I had mentioned how my thoughts toward one particular character had changed from the time when I read it as a senior in high school at 17 to now as a woman in my 40s who's actually lived a lot more life since I read it the first time. And the character is Curley's wife. She's the only female character in the entire story. She does not have a name. She's just known as Curley's wife, both in the novel or in the play version, which Steinbeck pretty much just took the novel and cut some things out and made it into a play when he did that. So, but he does not name her. And she's kind of a throwaway character in a sense. And at 17, I didn't appreciate her at all. Like she was what led to the ending of the book and the story, but she wasn't a character I put a lot of thought into. Now, as an adult, and part of it's due to this podcast and all the stories of women that we've shared on this podcast, um, I've thought very differently about her. So then it led me down the rabbit hole of who are the real life Curley's wives out there. And so I kind of did just a general Google search like I sometimes do when I'm starting this, and I came across a woman who was not actually a wife, but had a very tragic ending to her life. And in the same instance that where Curly's wife is killed and no one's really mourning her, this woman was killed in a way that her murderer just kind of threw her away. He got what he wanted money-wise from her and then just left her for dead. Fortunately, she was mourned by a lot of people once they discovered her, but we have to get to that point. So we are going to start with her story, which the other fun part was there's a connection, not really fun, but interesting to me.
Interesting.
Yes,
Yeah.
Colorado and Nebraska, which I've lived in both states. Diane and I are both Colorado natives. This is actually not far from Diane's background where this all took place, where the murder itself took place. So that's what we're going to start with. So, beginning with what was described in numerous news articles as the body of an attractive woman was found viciously murdered on June 4th, 1933, by two men who were prospecting for gold near Florissant, Colorado, which is not far from Cripple Creek. She had been beaten so severely that she suffered not only bruising, but disfiguration and several broken bones. Her remains were then dumped into a shallow and abandoned prospector's pit. Gasoline had been poured over her and lit, but the fire was extinguished by a thin layer of dirt and rocks, which were an attempt to cover the unceremonious grave. It would take 15 months to identify the victim as 55-year-old Ida Mae Hanson.
Ida Mae was born August 4th, 1877, to Swedish immigrants Peter and Breda Hanson. Though they came separately, both Peter and Breda came to the United States in 1868 and ended up in Illinois, where they married on December 29, 1870. They remained in Illinois until 1878, when they relocated to Polk County, Nebraska, and settled on a farm near Stromberg. In total, they would have 9 children, 8 girls and 1 boy: Hannah, Joel, Jennie, Ida, Esther, Alma, Lottie, Jessie, and Nellie. All the children lived to adulthood. The couple were married for nearly 49 years when Peter passed away in 1919. Britta remained a widow for 13 years until her death in 1932.
And the interesting thing about Britta, researching her was a little tricky because her name was Britta as the Swedish name, but she also apparently went by Betsy on occasion, and there was one other version of that. And so sometimes the records were a little off, but the dates and stuff matched up. So the family was active in the community and especially in the Swedish Methodist Episcopal Church. Peter was a very successful farmer, and all of the children were well educated. Ida Mae herself attended 3 different colleges: Bryant College, Peru Normal State College, and Fremont Normal State College. And I know that Fremont Normal State College was a teacher's college. I'm not sure about the other 2. Over the course of her life, she would be a teacher, a bookkeeper, and a milliner. The family was very close, and newspaper clippings tell of their social doings over the years throughout their community.
While most of her siblings married, Ida Mae remained single, but happy and busy. One social clipping for the Columbus Telegram on August 1st, 1932 says, "Home from trip. Miss Ida Mae Hanson returned this morning from a month's vacation outing with a party of friends at Troutdale in the Pines and Estes Park, Colorado." Oh, how lovely that must have been.
Right?
I've been so many less people too. Miss Hanson resumed her duties as milliner at Schweizer's store this morning. Miss Hanson will drive to Fremont this evening to meet her sister, Mrs. E.R. Baum, of Wichita, Kansas, who will accompany her there for a short visit. Mrs. Baum will then go on to Osceola for a visit with other friends.
And though she was single and content with work, family, and friends, it seems that she also yearned to meet a special man and fall in love. On July 4th, 1932, she was attending the local celebrations when she met a charming, somewhat younger man, he was 10 years her junior, who introduced himself as Charles W. Neal and claimed that he worked selling stocks and bonds out of Chicago. They spent quite a bit of time together before he disappeared for several months without a word until he returned to Columbus, Nebraska, where Ida Mae was still working as a milliner in May of 1933, and the two reconnected.
However, Charles was not what he presented himself to be. He was nothing more than an underhanded bootlegger, rum runner, and low-down con man. Before meeting Ida Mae on that fateful July 4th, he had spent the years 1926 to 1932, oh, this was good to know, as an inmate at the Colorado State Penitentiary in Canyon City after being found guilty as a member of a bootlegging gang in Teller County.
Which is where Cripple Creek is located, in case our listeners don't know.
However, his smooth-talking ways, dark hair, mischievous smile must have convinced Ida Mae that he was an honest man who wanted nothing more than to marry her and make all of her dreams of love finally come true. So sad. May 7th, 1933 was the last day any of Ida Mae's family and friends would see her alive. It was then that Ida Mae quit her job, telling her co-workers she was going away to be married. After she purchased a car, she and Charles Neal were seen driving out of town together. One news article claimed that in addition to her suitcase of clothing, she carried $1,300 in cash and $10,000 in securities, which was quite a hefty sum in 1933.
Yeah, both of those. You think about this. This is the Great Depression when
Right.
most people didn't have a lot of money. Her family did, though. The Hansons were successful. All of the siblings were successful. Her father was successful. And by the time her mother died, there was enough estate to split up between the children that they all got a comfortable piece of that estate. And because she was single at the time, all of her money went to her and she had it herself. So obviously, Charles was making note of the fact that this was a wealthy, single, older woman looking for love. Just keep that in mind. Witnesses in Colorado later reported having seen the two together in late May near Cripple Creek. On July 7th, 1933, one of Ida Mae's sisters received the following telegram. Don't worry if you don't hear from me. I have been married and am going to South America to live. I will write as soon as I get settled, Ida. This was the last any of her family heard from or of her until September 1935. By that time, Sheriff Ed Vineyard had been investigating the death of the mysterious woman found in the prospector's pit in June of 1933. Numerous people had come forward in an attempt to identify the remains, but each time proved the remains did not belong to the woman whose loved ones thought might be her. And in one instance, there was even some lady, and I can't remember if it was her husband or another family member who thought it might be somebody that was missing. Turns out she was alive and well, just not wanting to be near her husband.
She ran away.
Mm-hmm.
I looked up $1,300 in 1933 is equal to about $30,000 today. So that was pretty hefty.
That's a lot of money.
I mean, $30,000 is a lot today even. So
the fact that she was able to go and also purchase a car, before they left town, like,
right.
I'm sure that was a cash purchase for her.
Yes, because he probably convinced her, I'm sure, to do that. In an effort to discover who she was, the sheriff had a coroner work with a local dentist to work up a cast and a detailed description of the woman's teeth and the dental work that had been done. A notice was sent to every dentist in Colorado, as well as published in a national dental publication in hopes that someone would recognize their work and contact him. In September of 1934, Dr. A.F. Taylor, a dentist based out of both Columbus and Lincoln, Nebraska, was reading the publication when he recognized the work he had been done on a patient in the summer of 1931. That patient was Ida Mae Hanson. He contacted Ida Mae's brother, Joel, and told him about his discovery. At this point, the Hanson siblings were desperate for any news of their missing sister. Together, Joel and Dr. Taylor traveled to Cripple Creek, Colorado.
And you have to keep in mind this concept of recognizing a victim by their dental work and their teeth was a new concept. So like today, especially if you watch any of the like cop shows and stuff on
Forensics, yeah.
TV, and they do the forensics and they're like, well, what's the dental work? We'll recognize them by the dental work. And there's actually been a lot of cases solved because of that. But this was a new idea in the early 30s of using dental work as a means of identification for an unidentified victim. Joel was devastated to discover that the woman described in the dental publication was indeed his younger sister. Not only were Dr. Taylor's dental records an exact match, but when Ida Mae was found, she was discovered to have on her half a shawl. The shawl, and it was a silk shawl. The shawl had belonged to their mother, and Ida Mae had one half, while one of their sisters had the other half. Her money, securities, and car were all missing. After that, Joel was able to tell Sheriff Vineyard why Ida Mae had gone to Colorado and who she had been traveling with. Charles W. Neal was no stranger to the sheriff, as he had been a member of the law enforcement team that had arrested Neal and other members of the bootlegging gang back in 1926.
Sheriff Vineyard began an earnest pursuit of Charles W. Neal, traveling to Nebraska and Illinois, where he worked with local law enforcement. He was eventually tracked down in Iowa, where he was taken into custody in early 1935 and taken back to Colorado to stand trial for Ida Mae's murder. In early March, a jury was selected and the trial began on March 18, 1935. The prosecutor had wanted to seek the death penalty, but the judge ruled against it, stating that a life cannot be taken in Colorado on circumstantial evidence.
There was also, and I didn't actually put this in our notes, but there was also a bunch of drama when they were selecting the jury, because Neal's defense lawyer was concerned they couldn't get a fair trial because people of the jury would be friends with the sheriff, and the sheriff, in his mind, had a vendetta against Neal because of past crimes that he'd had to deal with him for. And that's part of the reason why the judge was like, well, the evidence that the prosecution's going to present is pretty much circumstantial. The dental identification, since that was still a new science and stuff, it wasn't thrown out as junk science, but it wasn't fully accepted as like the
Right,
way
like it is
DNA is
today.
accepted or something. Yeah. So that's why it was considered circumstantial. The Daily Sentinel, Grand Junction, Colorado, March 24th, 1935. The case that Sheriff Vineyard built upon a woman's tooth is not sufficient to sentence Charles W. Neal, ex-convict, to Colorado's gas chamber for the slaying of the attractive 55-year-old Nebraska spinster milliner, Miss Ida M. Hanson, Judge M. Michael told a jury today. The jurist instructed the jurors trying Neal for murder to either return a verdict of first-degree murder without the death penalty or acquit him. He left no other alternatives. All the evidence that Sheriff Vineyard gathered during 15 months of investigation while Miss Hanson's body was unidentified was circumstantial, Judge Michael said. In Colorado, a death penalty cannot be returned on wholly circumstantial evidence.
After 41 hours of deliberation, Charles W. Neal was found guilty of first-degree murder on March 26, 1935. He was sentenced to life in prison once more at the Colorado State Penitentiary in Canyon City as inmate number 18716. While he did not lose his life to the gas chamber, he was only in prison for 13 months when he died of complications due to pneumonia and liver disease on May 20th, 1936. No family claimed his remains, and he is buried on what is known as Woodpecker Hill in Greenwood Cemetery in Canyon City.
We've actually talked about Woodpecker Hill in a couple other episodes. Once the trial was concluded, Ida Mae's remains were finally released to her family. She was returned home to Nebraska. Her funeral, attended by all her living siblings and nearly the whole community, took place on April 7th, 1935, and she was buried near her parents in a family plot at the Stromberg Cemetery.
It's almost an anniversary because it's what, April
Oh yeah, just
18th?
past her
Yeah,
date of burial. But yeah, they had to keep the body in Colorado until after the trial because
right,
of how they were presenting evidence at the
right.
trial, so they couldn't return her home right away. Um, so yeah, that is, in short, the story of Ida Mae Hanson and her very tragic death at the hands of a man who was a jerk, frankly.
Yeah.
You could probably tell my feelings when you were reading his description where I said something about him being a low-down con man. I mean, that was all
That all
from me.
you?
That
You're
was
that
my description. That was not in the papers anywhere. I made that one all up. So, come on over. So our guest has arrived.
good.
Let's have you pull this chair around over here. So now we are at the part that we mentioned earlier in the episode that we are introducing our guest. We've never done it this way before. We've had the guest come in partway through the episode. But I would like to introduce to everybody Meredith Bolthouse, not Boathouse, as my autocorrect keeps trying to do every time I type her name into something. Meredith is an actor.
Yes.
That's one of many things that she is.
Yes, exactly,
And she is playing Curley's wife in our production of Mice and Men. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for
Welcome.
having me.
And thanks for taking time out on a Friday night to come and sit with us and do this.
Yeah, that's okay. It's a dreary night anyway, so.
I know it's too cold to be outside doing anything because for our listeners on the other side of the country and the other parts of the world, we're getting snow tonight. So
Yep.
yay,
Yep.
April snow showers.
Classic Colorado.
Yep. It wouldn't be the same without it.
Yep.
So Meredith got a chance to kind of briefly read over the information about Ida Mae too, and I told her why we wanted her to be on the show.
Mhm.
So my thoughts that I mentioned earlier about Curley's wife, and the same thing happens with Ida Mae. Both of these women were used by men in ways that really degrade them. In Ida Mae's case, it seems like she had most of her life, she was well respected in her community. And I don't think the men in her community were saying the things about her that get said about Curley's wife throughout the script.
So many things.
So many nasty things are said about this girl.
Mhm.
But, you know, she did meet this man who fooled her into thinking that he loved her and that he was going to, you know, make all her dreams come true when really all he wanted was the money that he knew she had. And once he got her on her own and away from everybody who knew and loved her, he got rid of her and took her money. And the way he disposed of her was he just threw her away. Like he left her in a pit, kind of buried her over. The only reason I think that they were more successful in identifying her is because even though he tried to set the body on fire, because he covered it so soon after, it smoldered the fire before it had time to do a lot of damage to her. So while there were burn marks on her, it didn't distort the features that they needed in order to identify her without getting too gruesome.
Yeah.
Some of the descriptions I read, because, you know, they loved their gruesome
Yeah,
descriptions
they were very
in the older
graphic.
newspapers. Went into some great detail about what they found when they discovered her. And so it just made my heart hurt because this happens to so many women over the centuries where they just get thrown away. They're thrown away characters. And I was thinking of that with Curley's wife. When I read the book at 17, I didn't really give her a whole lot of thought.
Oh,
She was the catalyst to the end of the story. You know, you needed her death to happen for the rest of the story to continue, but I didn't give her much thought. But as an adult, and even at the first read through when we were going through and you were reading off her parts and then the things that the men are saying about her, the names they call her, she's a tart. She's a, what else do they call you?
Gosh,
I'm trying to remember. I know I should have
remember.
put the script in front of me. Candy, I can't remember what it is Candy says right at the end after you've been killed. Spoiler alert, she dies
Yeah,
if you've never read the book.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
Hopefully they figured that out by you comparing my
yes.
character to
I would say.
gruesome murder and
If you've never read Of Mice and Men, Curley's wife is killed.
Yes.
Not necessarily by a man who intends to kill her in this case.
Yeah.
It's an accidental death, but all the other men in her life up to this point, aside from your father,
Right.
are just jerks to
Yeah.
her.
Yeah, truly.
So how do you feel about playing this particular character?
Yeah, I remember reading the book in high school as well and finding Curly's wife really obnoxious. Just every time she comes on, either, in the scene, whatever she's doing, she's just there to cause trouble and you just want her to go away.
Mhm.
And I think I'm in 4 scenes of the show, and I think in all of them, in different ways, at least one person is telling me to leave in
Mhm.
one way or another. At one point, there's like 3 different people telling me to get out of there. And that's how I felt about her too. And then, she dies and you're like, oh, I feel bad.
Mhm.
And then you just kind of move on. But I knew that as an actor that I couldn't approach the character that way, that I needed to find connections between myself and her and understand her more empathetically, in order to, do her justice.
Yes.
So that's my job, as an actor. And I think what I found just exploring her character is that I think she's deeply lonely. Reading between the lines of the play, but then also having historical context of the time, of a rural area in a really difficult economic time in America. Just she probably didn't have many options, and talks about marrying Curley kind of on a whim. And then she's literally stuck on a ranch and lives in a house with her husband and her father-in-law. And the only other people that she interacts with are the workers there, and none of them want to talk to her because they don't want to get in trouble.
Right. Because they're all men. There's no other women on
No
this
other
ranch.
women.
She's the only one.
Yeah, only woman. Yeah, only woman in the show, and then you extend that like, oh, she's the only woman on the ranch. And she talks, and one of my lines is talking about how she's not allowed to walk to town. I'm assuming that's sort of like a cultural faux pas for her not to go in
Right.
alone. There's no other women for her to interact
Yeah.
with, and you're like, what is this poor woman doing all day? Like, sure, she could cook, and maybe she's got a hobby, but I mean, we all understand that feeling. I mean, we all went through the pandemic of like, we are inside
Yeah.
our homes and we are going insane. And so she just wants to go find people to talk to.
And I get the impression, and this comes from something you say later in the play as her,
Mhm.
When you were a young woman as a teenager, you were fairly social. You would go to the dance hall where you
Mhm.
met Curly and other men that you talk about. And so to go from going to these dances and all these socials, and you say Curly doesn't take me out dancing anymore.
Yeah.
At one point, you're like you're just like you said, you're trapped in
Yeah.
this world. And every time you try to be what you think of or what she thinks of as being a friendly,
Right.
personal person, the guys are like, nope, she's flirting with us, and we don't want anything to do with that because they're trying to avoid the fights with Curly.
Right.
He's very jealous
Mhm.
and very possessive of her. And so, and my takeaway is I don't think he actually loves her.
Oh, no, I don't think so.
I think he wanted a wife to do all the wifely duties of, keeping house, ironing his clothes, doing all the cooking,
Mhm.
and the other wifely duties that
Yeah.
he has his gloved hand full of
Stupid clothes.
Vaseline
Yep.
on. But he doesn't love her,
No.
and you could have been any woman in his mind.
I completely agree. And I
Yeah.
think the fact that Steinbeck intentionally doesn't name her
Mhm.
in the book or in the play, she's just known as Curly's wife, I think is really telling of her identity is just the fact that she's a possession of this man and her role is wife.
And even after she dies and he realizes she's dead, or at least the way our Curly is playing it,
Mhm.
he's out to get Lenny, who was
Mhm.
the one who killed you, but not because he loved you, but because Lenny took something away that belonged to him.
Yeah, and it's interesting because while he's having that realization of what has happened to his wife, I'm on the ground and dead. So I actually I've never seen Solomon's reaction to my body, but I'm assuming it's not like, he doesn't sound distraught.
No, and when he turns towards, so there's a moment, and yes, because your eyes are closed, so
Yeah.
you're not seeing it, but I've seen it sitting
Mhm.
where I'm at. And he stands there and he looks down at you, and then he kind of turns towards the audience, and there's a little, it's almost like an evil smile
Mm.
on his face. It just a little bit of a moment. He's like, ooh, I get to, because at this point he's mad at Lenny anyway, because Lenny has crushed his hand in another scene.
Mhm.
And so this is his chance to get that revenge. And he has in his mind, a legitimate excuse. And the other guys are backing him up too, because yes, you were his wife, and
Yeah.
obviously he should be mad and want justice for it, right?
Right.
But the way he's like, shoot him in the guts. He wants, one, he wants revenge. Two, he wants to do it in the most painful way possible,
It's a
because to
slow
just
way to
shoot,
go,
yeah,
too.
to just
Yeah.
shoot somebody in the guts and not like what he wants Lenny to hurt for it.
Yeah.
But he's not hurting in a way where he loves you. He's just like mad that he's going to have to find another wife. It's like,
Yeah.
great, I have to do this all over again.
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of the feeling I get from the way Solomon plays them. And I think Solomon does it justice, but yeah, it's kind of sad. You can't see his face.
I know. I'm kind of tempted maybe one of these last few rehearsals just to like open my eyes out of nowhere.
Be like,
Maybe like
a little bit.
she does a very good job of playing dead too. Our director commented on it a couple nights ago, where she's like, I can't even tell you're breathing, because she lays very, very still the whole time. And this is with all of the guys coming around and like picking up her head and lifting up her arms and being like,
poking my face,
dropping her back
No,
down and like,
dead.
oh yeah, she's totally dead.
Yeah.
You've got that down.
I do. I know. Just take it.
Yeah, no, so when we did the auditions, we did video auditions for this. So everybody submitted their video, and you were our first woman to submit an audition. And Barb and I both watched it and we're like, this is, she's right for the role.
That's
But of
awesome.
course, we went through all the other women, I promise. We looked at everybody's video, but we kept coming back to you. And you, like I said, you were one of the first ones we got. And I'm so glad we did, because you've given her more of a personality than I think she otherwise could have.
Yeah.
And then that she sometimes doesn't get when somebody portrays her.
Yeah, I think it would be really easy to just focus on her purpose in the story, which is just sort of to be a lingering problem and, you know, subtle foreshadowing of trouble to come. And then again, the catalyst to kind of kick off, you know, the end of the show. And I just knew that I couldn't do that. Like as an actor, like people can tell when you're just fulfilling like a purpose, like you're
Right.
just there to do a thing so that something else can happen, but nobody sees themselves as the villain of their own story. And so I had to go to a place like she and I have very little in common.
I would agree.
And I had to, like, I don't think I've ever intentionally flirted with someone in my life. It's always happened by accident. And so I had to go, you know, something deeper. It was like loneliness. I can totally identify that. And I've written sort of, you know, the moment before in my script of like, what am I doing? Why am I coming into this space, instead of just like, I've entered,
right
now I will
Here's
talk to
the
people.
cookies.
Yeah,
now
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's always like, I'm bored, or maybe like I've inferred like Curley said something mean to me and I want to go get, you know, emotional fulfillment from somebody else, or I'm bored. My husband went into town to do who knows what, and I hear voices in the barn. I'm gonna go talk to somebody else. So it's never her setting out to go cause trouble or flirt with someone,
No.
or yeah, I had to justify it in my own mind, even if that's what the audience infers.
Yeah. And the only reason the audience infers that is because of the way the men behave toward her.
Yeah.
Every time she's mentioned, even when you're not physically in the presence, like the whole beginning of the show when George and Lenny first come to the ranch and the guys are introducing her, like Whit goes through this whole thing about, you know, what type of woman Curley married and keep away from her and, you know, be careful about her. And then George, of course, gets on to Lenny right away, like, because you're beautiful and Lenny likes pretty things. And he's like, do not look at her, do not talk to her, have nothing to do with her. And then, of course, the one that kills me the most, though, is after you've died and after all the men have taken off to go hunt down Lenny, Candy is still in the barn with you, and he sits back down on the hay bale and he just cusses you out. Like, I'm like, it kills me every time he does this. He's like, because you've ruined, in his mind, you're the reason everything is now ruined. All the plans they were making, everything for their future is ruined because of you. And I was like, well, it wasn't really her fault. Nope. She's just out in the barn, and Lenny happened to be there at the same time. And
we got to talking.
And yes, there is the thought that, well, she's going against all the rules. She was told not to go near the guys, and she goes near the guys anyway. But again, loneliness will make you do things you might not do otherwise.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I don't think her husband or her father-in-law could understand that message in their minds.
No, and she's not given a specific age either, but I can't imagine she's more than like 18, 19, 20.
Yeah, she's definitely a young, you know, she has the dreams of going to Hollywood and being in the pictures.
Yeah.
And you know, and she's been told by other men that she's beautiful,
Mhm.
and men before Curly married her,
Yeah.
and you know, but she still has to fight for her reputation too.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times you go in and say, I was totally a virgin when we got married. I mean,
Yep.
you don't use those words, but that's what you're inferring. You're telling these guys, like, I didn't sleep around, I didn't do all these things you guys accuse me of,
Mhm.
and yet you still say these things.
Yep.
And it's just, it's painful.
Yeah. It's very
So if you guys could rewrite Curly's wife's part, how would you write it?
well, we'd give
We
her a
don't want to
name.
Yeah, she
throw you
definitely
off.
have a name.
In rehearsal, we've been calling her Jolene. Our director Barb is is a big fan of Jolene. I wanted to name her Brittany because I thought it would be funny to give her a really non-period appropriate name.
Yeah.
Brittany Jolene.
That's how I put her name on her costumes, was Brittany Jolene. Mhm.
Yeah,
Because we wanted to make sure she had a name.
Yeah. exactly. I think it would be, you've mentioned this before, at least in rehearsal, that we have in Steinbeck's story, there are a group of what are called the sort of invisible characters, and she's an invisible character because she's a woman.
Mhm.
And just end of sentence, she's a woman.
Yep.
Other characters invisible because of their race or their age or you know, disability, something like that. She is invisible because she's a woman. And I think it would be really beautiful to have a moment of connection, of understanding the similarities between her loneliness and the other loneliness that is talked about throughout the whole show. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
the whole show is just about being lonely
Loneliness.
and what it does to a person. So I would put in a moment, at least one moment of connection, of understanding, like, oh, we're actually very similar. Our situations aren't that different. We're invisible in different ways, and we're lonely.
I think that moment would be especially powerful if it were between you and Crooks.
Yeah.
Crooks, again, if you're not familiar with the show or the story, Crooks is the one black man
Mhm.
on the ranch. He's a very hard worker. He knows his way about the animals and everything. And Slim, who's kind of the guy all the other guys look up to, really likes him. But because he's black, he's not allowed to live in the bunkhouse with the guys.
Mhm.
So he has a little room out in the barn where he has to sleep by himself. And he has this whole scene where he talks about how lonely he is because he doesn't get to have that same camaraderie that the rest of the ranch hands get.
Right.
And then, of course, at some point, Curly's wife comes in and
Mhm.
he's like, it panics him because how
Yeah.
many stories are there of white women in the presence of black men, especially in that time period in the 20s and 30s, where they said things that
Mhm.
these black men may or may not have done to them, and the guys are the ones that end up paying for it, right?
Yeah. In the
And-
book, Curly's wife even threatens him, like, very
Yes.
directly with that, which I'm really glad that's not in the play, because I don't want to say that
Yeah,
to
I'm
TJ.
glad that's not in there.
But
TJ infers
it
it
is,
as
yeah.
Crooks. He, you know, he's like, a white woman oughtn't be in a black man's room.
Yeah.
Like, and that's why, because it's such a dangerous
Yeah.
moment. So I think if you could rewrite it and make it so those two could have that connection without the fear of her accusing him of anything and vice versa, I think that would be really,
yeah.
really powerful.
Yeah, I agree. Or even poor George being told even before he meets her what kind of woman
Oh, yeah.
she is, and him maybe having a moment of saying, like, hey, maybe I'll meet her first before I judge her character.
I almost get that sense though between you and George
Mhm.
in the scene where you come in and you end up sitting down at the table for a minute right
Mhm.
before they get in the fight with Curly.
Yeah.
And you sit down and you're like, I'm just lonely. And there is a moment where he kind of looks at you like, okay, I can understand that.
Yeah.
You know, if he didn't have Lenny, he would be like you. He'd
Yeah.
be lonely too. He fortunately at this point still has Lenny. So there is a 1 second.
1
It's a
second.
very short moment. And then he moves on about, and he's
He
the one
hears
who
Curly coming in.
he hears Curly and he's like, you got to get out of here before Curly comes in and causes a scene.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, everybody can smell her too. So
Yep.
wherever she's been, she wears a lot of perfume.
I just want somebody to notice me.
Yeah. And that's what it is. She wants to be seen. It's
Yeah.
just like Candy wants to be seen, but he feels like he's invisible because he's aged out
Mhm.
and he's got a messed up hand that happened in an accident. So he's always worried that they're going to dismiss him anytime now because he can't do the work of the other ranch hands.
Yeah.
And of course, Crooks worries about it being black and you're the woman who nobody sees.
Mhm.
And Lenny, of course, has the intellectual disabilities. And while he's mostly happy in his own little world,
Mhm.
you know, everybody else can see around that he's not all there in
Right.
that sense. And so
Left to his own, like,
yeah,
he'd be in a lot of trouble.
which is why George is always like, I can't, as annoying as you get, I can't leave you alone.
Yeah.
And
Wish
he's,
someone said that about me.
I know.
As annoying as you
again,
get.
I wish, yeah. And there's the moment now where when you come into the barn and you're telling Lenny you're going to run away and you're hiding your suitcase and everything. I so wish that it would happen.
I know.
Like, I so wish there
Yeah.
would be that moment where he doesn't kill you and you
Yeah.
just take that suitcase and you go.
And I go. I don't know. Like, I wish that for her. I want her dreams to come true, but also like she's so young and so naive that like just the dream of like getting on a bus going to Hollywood, like she would be taken advantage of in so many other ways.
That's true.
As soon as she got there, it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to say she dodged a bullet. She gets murdered, so it's,
Yeah.
it's not
But
great.
she dodged
but
that bullet.
She dodged that bullet.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
Just, yeah, she can't seem to, there's no good options for her.
right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I felt. So when I was reading the life story of Ida Mae, and I had to go back and I found, interestingly enough, and maybe because we don't, well, no, Colorado actually has quite a few of its historic newspapers digitized now, but I wasn't finding as much on her in the Colorado papers. More her side of the story was printed in the Nebraska papers.
Well, that makes sense because that's
Yeah,
you were back there.
the way Colorado wrote about it, I mean, the story was there and the trial was there and I found it and I was able to piece it all together. But I had to look under Charles Neal's name as opposed to her name, because if I put in Ida Mae, I got almost nothing. If I put in the criminal's name, I got a lot more.
There you go.
Which again is something in our modern age. I know a
Yeah.
lot of people are starting to discourage using the names of criminals in order to honor the victims. And so like I said, it was easier to find his information sometimes than hers. Unless I was looking through Nebraska papers where she was definitely, like I said, much beloved. And when she had her funeral, it was very well attended. And people had been following the trial in the newspaper. And, I think there was that vindication that at least he got life in prison, even if he didn't get the death penalty.
Yeah.
But, yeah, unfortunately, that's not quite the same story for Curly's wife. Although technically in the end, her killer dies too.
He does. He does.
Yeah. So he, but fortunately, he doesn't have to suffer at the hands of Curly. Again, spoiler.
Yeah.
But this book was published in 1937.
I was gonna
It's been
say,
around
it's
a long
been around
time.
long enough. You haven't that's your own fault.
Yes, I don't feel bad for giving any spoilers at this point.
Yeah.
But I'm very, very glad that we were able to do this show, or we will be able to do this show. Because I'm hoping it'll give the modern audiences some of that perspective on women and our invisible characters. Because I'm costuming the show, and I do this with every show, I probably overthink the costumes sometimes too much, but all of our invisible characters. So if you're listening and you come see the show, you will notice at some point they all wear blue.
Yeah.
And some of them wear blue the whole time, like Lenny's in blue the whole time. You don't wear blue until the end.
Yeah, I die in blue.
You also get the most costume changes, because I felt
do.
Curly's wife needed something more, so she got 3 really gorgeous dresses to wear.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. It's like, I'm bored. I guess I'll change.
Change my
and see
clothes,
if anybody notices.
paint my nails. It's like,
Exactly.
what else am I going to do with my life out there?
Yeah.
I know you don't even have a pet. Like,
No.
Curly could at least let you have an animal.
I have a dog.
Cat or
Dog or
something.
cat or
Yeah.
cow.
Nothing.
Yeah, you got
I
nothing.
got nothing. I got Curly.
I'm sorry.
That's not Curly. Yeah.
But it's
We
a
could
good
make
show.
all sorts of inferences about Curly and
I know,
his
right?
character, and he's just a sleazeball.
Be interesting to rewrite the story from her perspective.
Yeah.
Yes, that would be, because then maybe Curly would die. But I shouldn't have said that.
He's just an angry little man.
He is an
really
angry
is.
little man.
It'd be nice to know then his backstory, because then you know how everybody has an excuse now for why they behave badly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't really know why Curly has such a dislike of his wife. Is it
Yeah.
just her? Is it all women that he feels that way about? Like,
I think
we
he's
know-
super insecure. I mean,
I-
he's picking fights all the time. He's
Yeah.
constantly paranoid. I mean, I think it's so funny. Solomon plays Curly. We don't actually share the stage together until I'm dead. Like, we're not on stage
Oh,
at the
that's
same
true.
time.
You are
We-
always gone before he comes on.
Yeah, we either come in right before or right after each other, and he's always asking, "Has anyone seen my wife?" Which I think is hilarious. But she's like playing a game of hide and seek with him all day. I'm just like, I don't want to hang out with him, so I'm gonna see who I can talk to and then run away before he gets
She
there.
just uses the excuse that she wants to be with him in order to be amongst everybody else.
Exactly.
She's like, I need to find Curl. Except
Yeah.
for when you go to Crooks's barn, and then you really are trying to find out the truth about what happened to his hand.
Right.
Because you
He
could
went-
tell he was lying.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
Huh.
It's such a good story. And you guys are such a good cast. I know I don't watch during the rehearsals. I'm usually
Mhm.
doing some other stuff, but what I have watched of it, I've loved.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to we start our tech week next week.
Mhm.
And then the show opens on Friday, April 25th.
Yeah. It'll be really interesting to have an audience and someone other than Barb like laughing or
Right.
reacting to what's going on.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the audience reactions
Yeah.
that aren't Barb's or
Right.
mine
Exactly.
or ours.
Yeah.
As far serious as this show is, especially towards the end, there's a lot of moments where we're not so serious in
Exactly.
rehearsal.
Yeah.
But I think that's how any story you're telling like that goes.
Right.
So yeah, it would be if we were super serious the whole time, we'd all walk away depressed every minute
Yeah.
after every rehearsal.
I mean, even still, it's hard to walk away. I mean, we finally got through the whole show last night and
Mhm.
watched the final scene with George and Lenny. And I was quiet the whole drive home. I was
Mhm.
like, this is hard. This is heavy to tell this story from beginning to end and feel all the feels and
Yeah.
do it. But that's also what is so beloved about it, I think.
And
And-
why it's lasted as long as it has.
Yeah.
And it still has themes that are still super relevant.
Yeah. I mean, loneliness looks so different today but because of the internet and
Mhm.
social media and stuff, but still very, very much relevant.
And people still have issues. Women still deal with being belittled and
Mhm.
betrayed by men. If you're any person of color, you're still dealing with racism
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. If you are too old, you are out of jobs and out of, people don't think of you as useful anymore, which is what Candy's going through.
Mhm.
He wants to be useful,
Yeah.
but there's a point where some people just don't. And then
But even if you're an older man, people look at you different than if you're an older woman.
Right.
true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if he reminisces a lot in the show about things that happened when he was a younger man. And, he was obviously a very good ranch hand at one point, and he had a dog who was good. But he does make the comment when he's relaying his vision, or he's talking about his memory of visiting the brothel.
Mhm.
And he went to a very expensive brothel. We figured out, because at one point George asked him how much it set him back, and he's like $15. And I went and did the math and went and found the calculator, which would be over $300, we discovered,
Wow.
in today's money,
Yeah.
to be in this particular brothel, but it was one of the really nice ones.
Mhm.
And I'm laughing because as he tells the story, he's like, well, the cigarettes were all free
Mhm.
and the something else is free. And I'm
Drinks
like,
free.
oh yeah, the drinks. And I'm like, well, they aren't really free if you were paying $15, but you felt like they were
Yeah.
free. But he's having this reminiscent, and then he says something like, of all the days in my life, I don't really remember, but this is the one thing I remember. So it was worth the $15. Like,
Yeah.
he's like, I've had that memory of that girl that I was with that day in that super fancy brothel
Mhm.
for my whole life, even though I don't remember all these other days as just a regular man. So it's interesting what you remember then.
Mhm.
And Curley is one of the only ones that doesn't have a flashback.
Right.
Slim doesn't either, but like you have your flashback to being a little girl and talking about the relationship between your parents
Mhm.
and almost getting to run away with your dad before he got
Almost.
caught.
Yep.
And so you talk about that, and we hear about how Lenny and George grew up. We don't really hear about the other guys so much.
Yeah.
They're my brown guys, as I call them, because they're all wearing brown because they all blend in with everybody.
Yeah.
Like they're the rest of the guys are the people that are normal in society.
Yeah.
And so we don't hear their backstories as much, but
Well, their whole job, the way it functions is just they keep replacing each other.
Mhm.
Like you go to one ranch, you work for a month or so, and then you go to another one and you just keep replacing each other. Like
Right.
after a while, I mean, Whit remembers someone's name,
oh yeah,
Um,
in the
yeah.
magazine when he comes across it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
but after a while, I would imagine all those faces kind of blur together, and it's like, well, one ranch hand's the same as another
right.
till Lenny comes.
And one branch job is the same as it, like all the jobs are the same.
Yeah.
And then you move
They
on.
would move. Yeah,
Yeah.
they would move from job
Yeah. So
to ranch to ranch to ranch. Yeah.
it's a good history lesson,
Mhm.
and it's a good social lesson,
Mhm.
and it's just a good story.
Yeah.
Yep.
So anything else you want to say about Curley's wife or?
I don't think so. It's just been I'm normally typecast in sort of the character role, just like naturally very goofy and like weird movements and sort of like I'm either like a scrappy little boy on stage or like a horse. I've been cast as so many animals. And what was so funny is that by accident I kind of cast myself as a dog after we started
This
rehearsal.
is true. You do.
There's a dog that is only off stage and referred to, and as a joke one night, I just did really like raspy, heavy panting of this poor old dog, and they want me to do it.
It sounded great.
It sounds like what it's supposed to, but that's sort of what I've gotten typecast as, and it's just recently that I'm starting to get cast as like the ingenue kind of, and that's very new for me and very weird. So it's been a really fun challenge to be an ingenue, but also a very unlikable ingenue, of just pressing into that and seeing how the process is different when the choices don't necessarily come naturally. I'm like, what do I do with my hands? Like, you want me to put them on my hips? Like, what is that?
Well, and in real life, you're a martial artist,
Yes.
so you can move in all those ways. And you just did was it your black belt yesterday?
It was a checkpoint moving towards my 3rd degree.
Yeah. So definitely not something Curley's wife probably is.
No. We thought we were joking last night about me throwing Lenny when he starts to play with my hair before he kills me, and just like instead just like throw him over my shoulder. But
that would be a whole new ending to the story.
Yeah, we have all sorts of ideas of how to change the story.
She's definitely the complete opposite of you as a person in a lot of ways.
Thank you.
But you're playing her very well.
Thank
and
you.
I think our audiences are going to, I think, have a better appreciation for her, hopefully, when they walk away.
Yeah.
And again, hopefully see you not just as the means to the end of the story, but as truly another person who got lost in this mix of a weird social time.
Yeah.
That was hard on a lot of people.
Yeah.
Especially in America, because of, there were lots of ranches and farms across the country that were going through those same situations.
Yeah.
And I know that was the time when my grandparents were growing up, and your mom, Diane, would have been familiar with that time period, and we've heard those stories. So I'm glad that we can bring some of that to the stage and bring it back to audiences. So I think our older audience members are going to appreciate that, but hopefully our younger audience members will also grow to appreciate something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we'll be
I hope so.
introducing them who may have never heard the story before.
Yeah.
Meredith, thank you so much for taking time out of your Friday night to join us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And again, folks, if you want to see the show, by the time this episode's airing, the show opens tomorrow. So tickets are online. I will put the ticket link in our show notes if you're interested in coming. We would love to have you there. Come say hi to me. Mostly I'll be backstage, but if I know people are there, I'll come out and say hi at the end of the show, after the show's over. So if you're there, give us a shout, and we will see you next time.
Awesome.
Thank you for joining us today. To learn more about today's episode, visit our website, theordinaryextraordinarycemetery.com, where you'll find additional links in our show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe to our channel. And if you enjoyed this or any of our episodes, consider leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Your support helps others find our show and discover all of our ordinary, extraordinary stories.
You can also follow us on social media for cemetery facts, photos, quotes, and more. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery. If you'd like to help support us financially, you can donate a cup of coffee by clicking on the coffee cup icon on our website or YouTube, or purchase some of our fabulous Ordinary Extraordinary Cemetery merchandise through our store link.
Until we meet again.